It is the year 1825 in a small stone village on the Welsh border, and there is a dead man laid out in the front room. The family will not look at you. The vicar will not stand near you. And yet, every person in that house has been waiting for you to arrive. You step up to the coffin. The dead man's daughter places a piece of bread on his chest. You pick it up and you eat it. Someone presses a small silver coin into your hand, and from that moment, every sin the dead man ever committed belongs to you. Every lie, every theft, every cruelty, all of it is yours now, carried home in your stomach. You are a sin eater, and this is the strangest job in British history. To understand why anyone would pay for this, you have to understand what people believed about dying. In this corner of the world, dying was not the scary part. Dying with your sins still attached. That was the scary part. A soul that left the body carrying unconfessed sins did not go up. It went down, or at best it wandered, knocking about the lanes at night, rattling gates and frightening the living. A priest could wipe the slate clean, but only if death gave him warning. And death, famously, does not always send a letter first. A farmer crushed by his own cart. A mother taken by fever in a single night. They died with the ledger still open. So the villagers of the Welsh borders came up with a fix, and the fix was beautifully, horribly simple. If the sins were still in the body, you could soak them out. Bread was laid on the chest of the corpse, sometimes with a bowl of ale passed across the coffin, and left to sit a while. The bread drank up the sins like a sponge in dirty water, and then someone, one specific, chosen, doomed someone, ate the sponge. That someone was the sin eater. Every district had one, and exactly one, the way a village has one blacksmith. Everybody knew where he lived, which was never in the village itself, always at the edge, past the last house, in a hut with no neighbours. Everybody knew his face, and nobody looked at it. Weeks would pass in which no one spoke a word to him. Then somebody died, and there would come a knock at his door in the middle of the night, and for 1 hour he was the most important man in the parish. The pay was sixpence. For a farm labourer, that was around 2 full days of wages. For eating a slice of bread. On paper, it is the best paid snack in history, except the sixpence was not for the eating. It was for what came with the eating. Every funeral added one more dead man's lifetime of sins onto the pile inside him. The arithmetic was merciless. A sin-eater who worked for 30 years might be carrying 1,000 lifetimes of lies, thefts, and worse, all packed into one soul, all waiting for him on the day he could not pass the load along. Because here was the cruel joke at the bottom of the job. Who eats the sins of the sin-eater? Nobody was the answer. He died with all of it. Which is why the man who took the coin was treated less like a tradesman and more like a walking plague pit. People crossed the road. Parents pulled children indoors. The church hated the whole business. Priests called it blasphemy, a mockery of confession, and threatened to bar sin-eaters from holy ground. And the same villagers who nodded along to the sermon on Sunday would still, the moment grandmother stopped breathing, send the fastest boy running to the hut past the last house. They condemned the man, and they could not bury anyone without him. We know the job was real because people wrote it down. In the 1680s, a gentleman collector of old customs named John Aubrey described a sin-eater of the borders in his notebooks. A long, lean, ugly, lamentable, poor rascal, in his words, who lived in a cottage by a lane and was fetched to funerals to swallow the sins of the dead for a loaf and sixpence. Aubrey recorded it as a curiosity, a leftover from a darker age that he assumed was about to vanish. It did not vanish. It carried on quietly, funeral by funeral, for another 200 years. Only the poorest and hungriest ever took the job, which will not surprise you. It was the trade of last resort, below rat catcher, below gong farmer, a job you took when the choice was your soul or your stomach, which is exactly what makes the last man on the list so strange. Because the last sin-eater in England was not a starving outcast at all. His name was Richard Munslow, and he was a respectable farmer in the hills of Shropshire with a good farm, a family, and a pew in the church at Ratlinghope. Then, in 1870, scarlet fever went through his house, and in the space of one single week, it took 3 of his children. A 4th had already been lost before. And something in Richard Munslow changed. The old custom of sin eating was nearly dead by then, remembered mostly by grandmothers. Munslow brought it back himself. The prosperous farmer stood at his neighbours' coffins, ate the bread, and took their sins onto his own account. Nobody is certain why, but the guess handed down in the parish is hard to forget. A man who had watched 3 children die in 7 days decided that nobody else's dead should ever be left carrying the weight. Richard Munslow died in 1906, and the job of sin eater died with him. His grave in Ratlinghope churchyard slowly crumbled and was forgotten, which felt like the natural end for the story of a job everyone had always wanted to forget. Except, it is not the end. In 2010, the people of that same village raised the money to restore his headstone, and the local vicar led a service over it. The man whose job was to be avoided got, a century late, the one thing no sin eater was ever given: a crowd at his own graveside. So that is the sin eater. The bread soaked up the sins. The coin paid for a soul. The village got its clean deaths, and one man carried the bill for all of them. It is easy to laugh at the belief from here, but strip the ghosts out of it and look at what is left. Every community, in every age, finds a way to take its heaviest burden and quietly hand it to one person it then refuses to look at. The Welsh borders just did it with bread and were at least honest enough to pay sixpence. And if you want more forgotten jobs, strange deaths, and the history they skipped in school, that is what this channel does. Subscribing costs even less than sixpence, and unlike the Sin Eater's coin, it comes with no strings attached to your soul.